that maybe young adult thrillers are just not for me. I'm gonna put it in the yeah, I read that category. Because yeah, I read that. That's it. So good. I loved it so much. Hello everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Casual. For those who are new here, we are so glad to have you here today. We are here with a new video that I've been seeing all over booktube right now. The most recent one that I watched was from Faith, so thank you so much for the idea. I know I've already put out a mid-year tag, but that doesn't really talk about all of the books that we've read. You know, we just talk about the highlights, and we're more focused on what's coming in the future for the rest of the year. But I wanted to actually go back and look on what we've read so far, kind of more in depth. So I figure what better way to do that than a tier ranking video. We have our 5 tiers today. We have Forever in My Heart. That is my 5 stars, 6 stars, maybe even a 4.5 that really stuck with me and will stay with me for a long time. Next, a little bit below that, we have Often in My Thoughts. I might think about it a good bit, but it's not in my heart. It's in my brain, but it hasn't quite made its way to my heart. And then we have, yeah, I read that. That's your 3.5s, mixed reviews, but had its moments of, oh, that was cool. Yeah, I definitely read that. And then below that, we have makes me question the author. Whether it's that the book was bad or in the sense of the writing was maybe weird or it just wasn't jiving, I would be open to reading something else by the same author, but it makes me question if I would. And then below that is definitely not for me. I will not be reading any more of this author. I will not be trying to redeem them in some way. It's just not for me. Will not be revisiting it in any way, shape, or form. I went through and I put together all of our books that we've read so far in chronological order. It took a hot minute, but we got there because it kind of puts them all in, a random order. So I wanted to kind of focus on the way that I read them in the order with which I read them, so you can kind of see how my year went. I haven't had a bad reading year so far, and these aren't necessarily going to go with my star ratings that I have talked about in my wrap-ups in the past. This is just going to be vibes on how I feel right now. Because sometimes in the moment, you're like, cool. And then later on, you're like, what happened? I don't remember at all. So we're trying to kind of go with it how I feel now. Does that make sense? So first off, we'll start with 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. So this one was my first Holly Jackson book that I ever read. And it's a young adult thriller. And it's about these 6 kids, young adults, that are in this RV, and then they get stuck out in the middle of nowhere with no cell service and all that, and it comes to their attention that someone is trying to kill them. The killer just wants their secret. So you kind of go from there. It did have some twists and turns. I did like it. I can't really say that I've thought about it since then. So I'm going to put it in the yeah, I read that. There's another book that we'll read later that I just think that maybe young adult thrillers are just not for me. We'll put it in the yeah, I read that category. Next, Devil House. A commentary on true crime and how it affects the victims, but fictionalized about a fictional crime. And I'm going to say definitely not for me. And I don't think that I'm going to read anything else by this author, to be honest, because I wasn't super invested in his writing style. It took me forever to read the book, and that's kind of a indication of I don't want to read this. Next, we have Winter's Longing. I'm going to put that in the yeah, I read that category. It was very cute, young adult romance. I don't think about it very often, but it was definitely what I needed at the time, and it was pretty well written. I just don't think about it that often. And then we have the only one left. I believe I rated this a 4.5. However, it's not Forever in My Heart. That would be another book of his. So I'm going to put that in the often in my thoughts because I do think about this. The twist really got me. The end is what killed it for me. The end and the one twist too many is what moved it from the Forever in My Heart to often in my thoughts category. Next we have The Last Word. I actually do think about this one by Taylor Adams. I thought it was great. The idea of the author of a 1-star review being like hunted by the author of the book itself, I thought that was really good. And she was not a, you know, delicate, useless protagonist either. Like she held her own from what I remember in basically like making herself hard to kill. I know that's a weird thing to say, but it's true. Next, You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight. I was just not a fan. I would be very cautious to read anything else by this author because it had a lot of like Gen Z, Gen Alpha slang, and the priorities were all weird. I know it's young adult, but I thought I was gonna really like the concept, but it just wasn't for me. I think I'm just too old. I'm too old for the target audience, you know? And then we have Just the Nicest Couple. I'm gonna put it in the yeah, I read that category. Because yeah, I read that. That's it. I'm definitely open to reading this author in the future because they've been touted as like one of the best in the thriller category. However, it just wasn't for me, but it wasn't bad either. So it was just middle of the road, so we're gonna put it in the middle of the road category. Check-in Mate by Ali Hazelwood. I'm very torn because I specifically think that this should not be a young adult book because it talks way too much about adult relations. It was like so much, and it was shoehorned in like the weirdest times, and the fact that even her little sisters would talk about it, it's like it was odd, and it should have just been an adult book. Put them in their 20s, bump her years up by like 2, and now she's in college, and it makes way more sense than she's just graduating from high school at 18. Like, it was a very adult style romance amongst young adult people is how I'll put it. And honestly, it makes me question the author. I thought that the story itself was good, but I think that the characters were too young to be experiencing that story. Good Bad Girl by Alice Feeney. That's going in the definitely not for me category. Actually, no. I'm going to put it in the makes me question the author category because I've heard so much about Alice Feeney, but I have not heard anything about this book specifically. And that makes me think that maybe I chose the wrong one to start with. So definitely let me know down in the comments below if I should read anything else. The only other book by Alice Feeney that I've heard of is Rock, Paper, Scissors, and I'm open to reading that because it's on Kindle Unlimited. But this one makes me question if their writing is for me. Next we have Old Country by Matt and Harrison Query. I thought that the storyline was so unique. I thought that it made such a cool attempt. The ending is what threw me. However, I do think about this, and the death in this book was one of the most creative I've ever seen. So I will put it in often in my thoughts, not because I liked the book, but because I really liked certain parts of it. Next, we have The Bride Test by Helen Huang. Let's just put that right in the Forever in My Heart category. I've talked ad nauseum on this channel about this series and how much I love it, so I won't go super far into it, but the autism representation, the family, the cultural aspects, the focus on immigration, the focus on bettering yourself even outside of your relationship, I just really liked it. Next, we have The Fury by Alex Michaelides. I am going to put this in the often in my thoughts category. I really liked this. There was just a few things about this that was a little too twisty. Like, you almost, like, you're like, oh, that's how she dies. And then she just doesn't die. And you're like, oh, that's how she dies. And then she just doesn't die. But I really loved the setting. I really loved the main narrator and how just pompous and ridiculous that he was. And I really liked the main character, Lana, and how everybody expected her to be one way, but she wasn't. And so I really, really liked that, but it just doesn't bump up into the Forever in My Heart category. The Forever in My Heart category is not going to have too many, but I feel like this Often in My Thoughts is going to have a lot. Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Another young adult thriller. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. I'm just going to put it in the definitely not for me category. It took me so long to read. I didn't have any interest in continuing the series. There were so many threads that weren't tied up. They were still loose at the end, which I know it's a series, but like that's a little too many. Little Eyes by Samantha Schweblin. I am going to put this in the yeah, I read that category. I think that it's so interesting, but it's so specific. It's so specific in the fact that it's a horror anthology about one specific type of like horror aspect, and so I'm just gonna put that in the yeah, I read that category. Feel free to, if you want to know more about these books and if you want to hear more of my in-depth thoughts, feel free to check out my monthly wrap-ups. They're all in a playlist. I go in-depth more about each individual thing. This is only up to the end of June, so I did not include July because I'm filming this on the 17th of July. So I'm not including any books that I've already read this month. The Invited by Jennifer McMahon. I thought this did better than Old Country for the same plotline, basically. So I'm going to put it in the Often in My Thoughts category because some things that Old Country did better than The Invited, and then The Invited did some things better than Old Country did, so I'm going to put them on the same plane. The Heart Principle by Helen Huang. Let's just go ahead and put that up there. So good. I loved it so much. This one's my favorite one of the series, followed closely by The Kiss Quotient and then The Bride Test. It's just so good. And these are not romance books. They say they are, but they're not. The autism representation, the kind of OCD also representation in The Heart Principle. It also had caretaker burnout, which was a very heavy storyline, so definitely go into this cautiously if that's something that you have gone through. And a lot of like family misexpectations, and it's very heavy, but it's so good. I cried during that for sure. And then Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, part of two interconnected series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. The From Blood and Ash and the Flesh and Fire series that kind of go together. So I get kind of confused about which one is which just looking at it like this. I do think that Kingdom of Flesh and Fire was probably the Often in My Thoughts category because I did like it. It wasn't a Forever in My Heart, but it was better than a yeah, I read that. So we'll put it Often in My Thoughts. It was very intricate to the plot. These books have so much action and so many things happen in them because they're very long. They're about 600 pages long. So they're kind of hard to put on this, but I really did like them. Next, we have The Silent Companions. Historical horror about these wooden cutouts that look like, like cardboard cutouts of like famous people or whatever. They're hyper realistic wooden paintings that move themselves around the house, and then strange things start happening and people start dying. I thought it was really interesting in the sense of like, it's a historical horror. I feel like I don't read very much of that, very gothic setting. It got interesting when it talked about like who lived in the house before, but I think it was more of just, yeah, I read that category. The Resting Place by Camilla Sten. I loved this book. Often in My Thoughts, for sure. The ending the ending should have had more lead up to where you would like understand where she's coming from, but that only docked it like half a star. It's The Lost Village by her is a 5 stars Forever in My Heart, but The Resting Place is just so close. And then we had Crown of Gilded Bones. I actually really liked this one. It's hard to talk about without spoiling any other books. However, they are a romantasy first and foremost, so they need to be the romantasy part, the romance part. So they're together, and at this point, it's really nice to see. It's a 3rd book in the series. They haven't broken up 100 times and gotten back together. They're like actually working on things as a couple together, which I feel like you don't see very often. You just see people like either break up and get back together just so you can have that, you know, newness again, or they're constantly fighting, or they are just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And this is like they're actually working together, you know, king and queen style, to deal with what's going on in the kingdom. And I really liked that. Next we have The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. This was her first book ever, and I thought it was cute. However, I read these out of order, so I knew a giant spoiler that changes the trajectory of this entire book. So with that kind of like twisted my expectation of this, so I'm just gonna put it in the I read that category. We'll see books later by her that make it way higher than that, but it definitely suffered from debut author syndrome, if that makes sense. Next we have Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. Yeah, I read that. Unexpected pregnancy, but in the sense of like, you know that going in. That's the point of the book. Is she ready or not for a baby? She's single, she had a one-night stand with a bartender, and now she's pregnant. The man on the cover is not the father of the baby. He is her best friend's brother, who's actually being more supportive to her than her best friend is, because her best friend struggled with infertility, and that was a major like problem for her mentally, getting over the fact that her best friend accidentally got pregnant. So it was a lot of like their friendship, but then that infertility struggle, but also trying to figure out with the dad if he's going to be involved, and then Shep, the golden retriever-esque love interest. It was just, it all was like halfway. Jack of all trades, master of none. It tried too many things. It was okay. Next we have The Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. Thought this was really interesting, but I didn't think it was anything groundbreaking. A lot of hot girl, smart girl symbolism, and it just wasn't anything crazy for me. Next we have Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Arnfeld. I'm gonna put that solely in the definitely not for me category. I don't even know how to describe this book. It was very small, but it was trying to do like far off scary fear brought close in like a very weird way, and it was like very symbolic and metaphorical, but I didn't get a lot of it, so maybe smarter people than me will like it. That kind of writing is just definitely not for me. Next we have Summer Reading, and I actually listened to this as an audiobook. I thought that was cute. I think it did dyslexia representation pretty well. The main guy's struggle of like trying to justify not knowing his father. It's still a romance at the end of the day, and it was kind of middle of the road. Next we have A Shadow in the Ember, which is the first novel in that companion series to From Blood and Ash, the From Flesh and Fire series. I actually really liked this. The characters are very, very similar to the first one, or to the From Blood and Ash series. I think that Serafina, which is actually how she says to pronounce it in the pronouncing guide at the beginning, so it's Sera and Serafina, was very much like Poppy, and Ash is very much like Hawk. It was very copy-paste. However, if you like the first one, then you'll like this one. You know, very similar vibes. And then we have Abby Jimenez, Just for the Summer. Put that in the Forever in My Heart category. There's been very few times where I wanted to reread a book, and this is one of them. I thought it did the deeper meaning stuff so much better than I thought it was going to. It's all happy and bright and shiny, but it is not a happy, bright and shiny book. It's a romance. They do love each other. However, they're both going through so much. It's insane, and it's so good. A War of Two Queens, I will put solely in the yeah, I read that category. I get that you need it for the plot. However, they put too much spice in this book. We get it. They're together. But like, damn girl, chill out. Like, it's so much, and it's so unnecessary. And after we had so much going on in The Crown of Gilded Bones, like politically, action-wise, like stuff was happening, and then that all just like ground to a screeching halt in A War of Two Queens, and barely anything happened, and basically the whole book takes place over like 3 days in one spot, and all they do is talk, and it's all they do is talk and sleep together, and that's it. And it's not enough. You've set the precedent way too high, and then you plummeted it with A War of Two Queens. Next we had Starvaker I will put that in the makes me question the author category. I thought that it had a really cool aspect and really cool parts of it. However, I didn't really like the writing style. All of the characters were very unlikable to me. So I wonder if something else I'll like better by him. I don't know. We'll see. Next we have Funny Story by Emily Henry. This is a tough one, because there are parts of it that make me want to put it in Forever in My Heart. And there are parts of it that put it in the Often in My Thoughts. So I'm going to put it in the Often in My Thoughts category, because if I'm even questioning whether it goes in the Forever in My Heart category, it shouldn't. You know, that's how I feel about 5 stars. If I'm even questioning whether it should get a 5-star or not, then it's not going to. Funny Story is about Daphne and Miles. Daphne, her fiance, broke off the engagement because he wanted to be with his childhood best friend, Petra. And Petra is Miles' ex-girlfriend. So now these are 2 exes that end up having to live together because they both lived with their significant others who are both now living together. So, thought it was very cute. I think that almost it would have been better if they hadn't gotten together. I think that they would have been great as friends, or maybe a little bit longer as friends. I think they maybe rushed it a little bit. But I understand there was this time crunch in her head that he didn't have. So I get why that was the way that it is, but that just kept it out of the 5-star category. Next, we have Winter People by Jennifer McMahon, and I'm going to put that into the Yes, I Read That category. Thriller, supernatural elements, 3 main storylines, 2 different timelines. It just wasn't anything special. And then we have Anxious for Nothing. I'm actually not going to put that on this rating because it was a audiobook nonfiction that I read. I just wanted to put on here that I read it. I don't tend to rate nonfictions in this type of category, but I definitely would recommend it. Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey. I actually really liked this. I'm going to put this in the Forever in My Heart category. I think I gave it a 4.5. However, the more I thought about it, the more I remembered it and really loved these characters. And I really hope that we see them in the continuation of this series. The Au Pair Affair just came out and I have it on hold at every library that I'm a part of. So hopefully I'll get it relatively soon. But like I said, it just came out, so we'll see. Grumpy Sunshine. She's his biggest fangirl. But she's also very knowledgeable, and she's not just fangirling just to fangirl. She actually knows the sport and wants the sport to be better, and she thinks that he makes it better until he just fell apart completely. And so my husband said that the golf terminology is not super accurate, but who cares? Romance, baby! I liked it a lot. Type 1 diabetes representation, exploitation by the sports industry representation. I think it's great. Next we have Sealed by Naomi Booth, and I'm gonna put that in the Yeah, I Read That category. It's alright, I guess. Ecological horror, body horror, a little too close to the pandemic, written by an Australian lady, so there was a lot of Australian slang that I had to look up. And I don't think it had enough to be any more than this. Next, we had Next Door Nemesis by Alexa Martin. I'm going to put that in the Yeah, I Read That category as well. It was cute. Girl moves back home after her career and personal life implode. And he is her former best friend turned enemy from high school, who's now the president or going to be the president of the HOA, and she decides to mess with him. She's going to run against him. And then they end up having to work against each other, but also together for the good of the town. And I think they get over their problems too fast. Chlorine by Jade Song is going to go in the definitely not for me category. Our Wives Under the Sea and Chlorine give me very similar vibes. They're just not for me. I get it. It's body horror and hot girl, smart girl symbolism. I just think that the character is on some kind of spectrum of the sociopathy side of things, And I know that that was put on by a bunch of pressure by her coaches and her parents, but like, it's no excuse to treat other people like that. So, I didn't like that part. And then we have I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. That's another nonfiction audiobook that I read that I will not be rating. It's about a woman's, internet sleuthing search for the Golden State Killer. And it was by Patton Oswalt, late wife Michelle McNamara. That was really sad to hear him talk in the afterward about her and how much joy this brought her to like be searching for these things, and that was heartbreaking. And I thought that the book itself was very well written. However, she passes away before it's published, so a lot of the chapters start with, and these were pieced together from her notes that we found, and stuff like that, which is again a sad reminder. Next we have Expiration Dates by Rebecca Searle. I'm going to put that in the yes, I read that category. This is almost like magical realism in the sense that she always knows when her relationships are going to end. Whether it be like inside of a gum wrapper, or stuck on her windshield, or on the bottom of her shoe, or slid under her door. How do you tailor your love life if you know exactly when it's going to be over? How much do you give to this person? What's the quality of your relationships in that time? It was just interesting. And it kind of circled back around, and I don't know that I really liked the ending, but it was alright, so I'll put it in the yeah, I read that category. Butcher and Blackbird, I'm going to put in the often in my thoughts. I have recently read the sequel, and I liked the sequel better, which is a very, very, very unpopular opinion. I listened to the second on an audiobook, and I read the first one. That might have been it. I didn't really connect with our two main characters of Rowan and Sloane. I thought that the concept was so interesting. I've never heard anything like this. However, there was such giant gaps in time for no reason when they could have been together that whole time, which was odd. And I just think that the action was great. The romance was okay. I gave it a 4 stars because of that, and that's why it's in the often in my thoughts, because it was just so creative. And you see these characters a lot in the second one, but I do think that the second one did it better. Next is another nonfiction audiobook that I read called In the Dream House. I didn't rate it as well. However, it was a little bit disjointed, and it was very flowery and metaphorical writing as well, so know that going in. It's definitely like part metaphor, part short story collection, part magical realism. So know that in advance. The 5-Star Weekend by Ellen Hildebrand. Honestly, I'm going to put that in the makes me question the author. I think that I need to find another Ellen Hildebrand to read. I've heard that The Hotel Nantucket is the best one by her, so I'll be reading that one whenever I choose to next. However, this one I just did not connect with. The characters were awful. Choices that they make were so selfish and were so like ass backward half the time, and it just wasn't for me. But I will definitely want to look for something in the future by her. So that's what makes it not in the definitely not for me, but into the makes me question the author. Next we have The Soulmate Equation. I loved this book. I liked it better than The True Love Experiment because I liked Jess, the single mom, better than Fizzy. I liked River. I thought the third act conflict was perfect. It made great sense. How the main characters handled it fit perfectly with their personalities. And there were actual stakes because there was a child involved. I've grown to realize that I really like single mother or single parent romances because there are stakes involved. It's not just two adults. Like, there's this child that makes you think an extra layer about all of this, or the fact that you should think an extra layer about it, like all of your romantic encounters. And I thought it was great. Next we have Foe by Ian Reid. I'm gonna put that into the makes me question the author category. Just not for me. It was very dry, it was very slow. If you didn't pick up on one small aspect of this book, the whole thing's thrown off. And I picked up on it, so that was what kept it out of the definitely not for me, and then that put it in the category above. Next we have Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. I really liked this. I liked it so much. However, I think I'm going to put it in the off into my thoughts category. Another single mother. It's so close to being forever in my heart. However, I think that the conflict could have been resolved way faster if these people would have just had one conversation. Just one. And it would have solved so many problems. Then we have Same Time Next Summer by the same author. I'm going to also put that in the often in my thoughts category. Because it's like a childhood best friend come back into her life as an adult. And it makes her rethink like her entire marriage engagement to this man that she's currently with, and if he's best for her, and if she is the best version of herself that she wants to be with him. And I really liked the way that they handled this, you know, love triangle in the sense of she didn't go too far, which was really nice. Next, we have When in Rome by Sarah Adams. I'm going to put this in the Forever in My Heart category, along with Practice Makes Perfect. I thought these were both so well written. They're very tension heavy without being super spicy, which is really nice. And I didn't realize that that's what I wanted until I got it. They're definitely companion novels, but almost a sequel, because like the events of this one happen and then the events of this one happen, and they're directly tied to the events of the first one. I really, really liked that part. Sometimes interconnected standalones don't have enough to do with each other because they want them to be standalones. However, I think that this one you almost should look at as a series to really know the characters. Then we have Mislaid in Parts Half Known by Shauna McGuire. I am going to put this in the I read that category. I think that this is one of the weakest in the series. That makes me so sad to say. It was trying to be too much, like too many philosophical things, too many shoehorned in like lessons to learn, and it lost its part of the story for me personally. Next we have The Husbands. Honestly, I'm gonna put this in the makes me question the author category. I loved the start of this. However, it devolved quickly into something that I didn't really like. And I don't know what could have saved it, but I had to push through to finish it, and it just wasn't for me. But I'm willing to give this author another try. Next we have Burn the Negative. I'm going to put this in the often in my thoughts category. I really, really liked this. I know it's nothing super out there when it comes to creativity, but I really, really liked the way that it was done. I thought back on my wrap up, and I think that it's super ironic of how I'm saying I think that it should be a movie when the whole point of the book is that it shouldn't continue. But I would really love to see that. I would love to watch it happen instead of read about it, if that makes sense. I thought that the twist was very inventive. And then we have Your Home is Where the Bodies Are, or Home is Where the Bodies Are. Makes me question the author. I've heard very mixed reviews about Geneva Rose's books. I am cautious about picking up any more. I think that it had its moments, but those moments were few and far between. I'm open to reading another one of hers, but she only gets one more shot. So if you're a Geneva Rose superfan, tell me which book to read that will be better than this one, that will redeem this one. Next we had Bad Summer People. I really liked this. Often in my thoughts. Messy, rich, dramatic, selfish people on a summer vacation, and these people are awful to their kids, they're awful to their partners, they are awful to themselves, and they're cheating everywhere, and everybody is absorbed in this tennis match for no reason. And I do think that where it suffers is the fact that the very beginning of the book, a body's discovered, and then you don't talk about it for the rest of the book until the very, very end. I think that it struggles there. I think that they should have threaded the needle a little bit throughout, and then it would have made it much stronger. Next we had Fruit of the Dead by Rachel Leone. I'm gonna put that in the I read that category. It was very fever dream. It was very metaphorical about the pharmaceutical industry, about finding yourself when you're young, about older adults taking advantage of those who are looking for guidance, classism, but it was one of those ones that tried to do too many things and it just kind of derailed at the end. We have next the Bromance Book Club. I'm gonna put that in often in my thoughts. I really liked it. It's so inventive. We see excerpts of the novel that they're reading. We see a married couple going through trouble, which you don't normally see. You see like a couple that's trying to get together for the first time, not that's trying to save who they are like up front. I thought that was a really interesting and cool concept for someone who is married. It's nice to see that there's like more than after they get together. It's like that happened so long ago for me. It's like, tell me something that's happening that's relevant to my life now. And that was really nice. The second one, Undercover Bromance, however, I'm going to put that in the I read that category, because it, like everything that I found charming about this book, it removed them. And it just became your run-of-the-mill romance book. It's about the sister of the wife in the first one, and then one of the other bromance guys, one of the other book club guys, and it just became just your everyday romance. You don't really hear about the book they're reading at all. It doesn't tie into the story. It just Then we have Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. I'm gonna put that in the often in my thoughts category. I liked it. I didn't like it as much as The Only One Left or Home Before Dark, but I thought it was inventive. You know, you play the game of paranormal or not with him, and that part is really interesting. Thought the choices that were made by the characters in this one were very realistic, which I actually appreciated. Makes it sound boring, but it's not. It makes it sound like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense. Whoa. Next, we have the third book in the bromance series of Crazy Stupid Bromance. This one tried to get back to the charm of the first one, but it just didn't succeed. It's about one of the guys from the book club and the best friend of the girl from the second book. They were best friends, and they like don't know how to bridge the gap between best friends and lovers. They took too much time, I think, getting together, and the fact that they both clearly knew and still chose not to act was a bit odd. Because the reason to not act is that you don't know, but in this one, it was definitely they both knew and they just chose not to. And then the last book that I read in June is Isn't It Romantic, the fourth book in the series. There is one more. It's a Christmas book, so I'll be waiting more towards Christmas to actually be reading that. However, this one is going in the Forever in My Heart category. I loved this book. I thought that it took what was great about the Bromance Book Club and just made it better. We get the excerpts back from the story, and the fact that he's writing this one. We get my favorite character from all four books as the main character in this, and then his childhood best friend Elena. They get married so they can both live in the US legally, and he's playing professional hockey, she goes off to school, and then they don't talk for like 6 years. He's still holding a torch for her, and she is trying to figure out what she wants out of life, and I thought that was really nice in the sense of he doesn't pressure her into anything. He just kind of is always there for her and wants her to remember that he loves her, but he doesn't make it as obvious as he should, which is very human. And then she doesn't handle it well all the time, which is human. And the third act conflict, I think, makes perfect sense for her character and for the story that they were trying to tell. And you see way more of the Bromance Book Club again, which it's like like I said, they brought all of the good parts of the first one and just made them so much better. So here's our tier list, everybody, with our ones down here that we don't rate, but I would recommend Anxious for Nothing and I'll Be Gone in the Dark. Don't necessarily think I'll recommend In the Dream House. However, if you like very flowery metaphorical writing, go for it. Let me know down in the comments if you guys agree or disagree with any of these choices. These things are very subject to change. However I feel, I do think that it pretty much says what I want it to say, though. I'm looking forward to doing this at the very end of the year, and I would love to see you guys posting any tier ranking videos as well. I think they're so fun. I love you all. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Make good choices, support your local library, and happy reading.